Welcome everyone to Ride the Stream. I'm Michelle and I'm joined with Travis, my co-host, and we are here to discuss old and new television series and films streaming on our favorite platforms. We are starting with the TV series Lost, which originally aired from 2004 to 2010 for a total of, let's count it, 121 episodes.
So
Very
exciting.
exciting. As we're recording, all the seasons are available at Netflix. So, a little bit about me. If you're new here or if you're returning, we're very happy about that. But I'm Michelle Brittany. I'm an independent pop culture scholar. I've edited books on James Bond, space horror films, and co-edited a collection on horror literature. I'm currently co-editing a book of essays on the Mummy franchise that will be released in 2026. And Travis, I want to tell folks a little bit more about you.
Yeah, I am a geeky dad. Uh I've got
Yeah.
I don't know if I've mentioned it, but I have two amazing kids who inspire me to write. Uh I've been writing uh I called myself officially a writer 13 or 14 years ago. So I've published some fictional novels. Right on, written on a handful of different entertainment sites over the last 8 years. Currently writing for Fanbase Press, and I have my own Substack, the Neverending Streamer, which allows me the flexibility to kind of write about what I want to write about. So, yeah,
Such a
that's me in a
survivor.
nutshell. Yeah, yeah. My favorite reality TV show, Survivor. Which that just wrapped up its 47th season. So that was
Wow.
fun to kind of cover that, and that will be back at some point early in the new year. I'm guessing somewhere around February. So,
Oh, okay.
um,
Do they
yeah,
do
that's
like
me.
two? Do they do two seasons a year? Does it work out to about that?
Yeah, so what they do the late spring, early summer, they'll uh record two seasons. It's like I think it's somewhere around 4 to 6 weeks apart. I could be
Okay.
off on the timing of that, but they'll do one season, then they'll have some time off. They'll shoot the second season, and then one of those seasons will air in the fall, and the other season will air in the spring, winter and spring. So, and they've been doing that. I think that's how they've been doing it for most of its time. I mean, it started in what 2000, so
Wow.
show's been on a long time. So it's definitely fun to watch. It was another good season, so it's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, I don't even
Which is
watch
different and completely
Survivor,
different
but
from Lost.
yeah, I don't even watch Survivor, but very much enjoyed your Substack articles about it and watching the clips to see a little bit more about it. I don't own a television, so I don't have access to watch the show, but I'm probably be easily persuaded to do so, and have a chit chat with you about it. But yeah, it's an interesting show. It's funny because I used to watch the Amazing Race or whatever it
Yep.
was. I used to watch that one. Uh,
Yeah. Well, so I think at least presently, when a new season of Survivor comes out, I think usually it's the next day they will release the episode on its website, so you can kind of
mhm.
watch it from your computer or um. So if you're ever interested, that would definitely be a way.
Oh yeah,
And that's how I was able to do it sometimes if I were missed an episode or if the kids wanted to watch, I could pull it up for them. So,
yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Nice that there are options.
yes.
Well, as we've talked in other episodes, we kind of hooked on to Lost because I'm a Lost newbie. I didn't watch it when it originally aired back in 2004 beyond. Um, and I was looking for something to watch on Netflix. And I tend to like to watch something where all the episodes are already up. And I looked, and Lost was one that I'd heard of, but I have never watched. And I thought, I was working on some stuff, and I thought I'll put it on in the background, like, we do. And I started watching and got through about episode 21, I think, but I know that I emailed you probably around episode 4. And hey, Travis, did you ever watch this show called Lost? And that just opened the floodgates from there.
I was so excited to like hear your thoughts, and we had the idea of doing a podcast for a while now, and just deciding to record it and put it on YouTube for now was made total sense. And my wife and I Megan and I were in the process of deciding what streaming service to get next because we
Yeah.
dumped Disney Plus. Um, and so, we kind of was like, oh, we can talk about that. Sure. Let's get Netflix. Yeah. The kids were excited about getting Netflix. Um, and so it was a perfect excuse to get it sooner than later. Um, and it's so fun coming back to watch it. We were just talking offline and like kind of realizing things that I hadn't noticed before. And I've already watched the series like a handful of times already. It's been 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Um, but like just with this episode specifically, realizing some things uh just that I hadn't picked up on before. And I don't know why, but you're still able to like just because there are so many things that happen in each episode. Um, so definitely, as always, interested to hear your perspective as the newbie of our group.
Um, yeah, and I did take some notes on this one because this was one of those that I had, I watched through once, and then when we decided we're going to do ride the stream on this show, I held off, and then as we started recording, I would rewatch. So I did jot down some notes regarding kind of my initial thoughts about it. But I think we should go ahead and maybe jump into plot synopsis. But before I do that, the name of the episode is called Whatever the Case May Be. And as always, we queuing into the titles. So case, or in the case of this episode, it's a briefcase. But it did originally broadcast back on January 5th of 2005, so right after the new year. But I also noticed that it had been about a month between broadcasts of episode 11 and episode 12, which I thought was interesting. And I guess that's probably, Christmas specials going on, and, whatever else might have been going on right then. I actually didn't take a look to see. Um, Additionally, our focus character is Kate again. So we have some flashbacks with her. Not as many as we've had with like Charlie or Claire, where it seemed like we had about 5 or 6. I
Yeah.
think we may have had about three, um,
Yeah, there
three
were just a few.
flashbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did get to learn more about Kate in this episode. So I'll go ahead and get started with the synopsis. Are we in paradise? The symphonic music accompaniment as Kate picks fruit from the jungle is very serene. There's a peacefulness about it. It's kind of welcoming after the prior episode. She's picking the fruit. She looks almost like a dressed Eve in this beautiful jungle, uh, allowing us to kind of forget about prior episodes, torture and monsters and other unknown things that go bump in the forest. But as she gets down out of the tree, a twig snaps behind her. The music turns eerie, and another snap of a twig. Kate bends over and kind of shyly picks up a rock and throws it in the general direction of where she heard the snap, to which we hear an exclamation of ouch and probably son of a bitch is heard from the bush. Oh, it's just Sawyer following at a distance to keep a protective eye on Kate. She tells him that she's having to find food further afield because the survivors are going through for food a bit more. And so it kind of explains why he's actually following her. It's not really creepy, but he has an interest in her already, so it's not a surprise that he's kind of keeping an eye on her, making sure she's okay. But as they start walking, they kind of banter a little bit, and Kate hears something and gets Sawyer to be quiet. And they walk through this series of bushes, and they come out onto this beautiful kind of small lake with a beautiful waterfall. They banter some more. Sawyer says, well, he's going to take a dip because, he's got to nurse his now bruised knee. And Kate's like, okay. So, he takes his shirt off, she takes her pants off, and they jump into the pool of water that looks very nice and inviting. Again, we're still in a wonderful paradise moment. Underwater, however, they come upon a pair of dead people still buckled in their seats. Sawyer loots for the wallet, and Kate lays claim to the metal briefcase that's underneath the seat. Sawyer realizes that the case is not her, and he decides to take it himself. She plays coy and says, go ahead and take it. It's no big deal to me. He asks if she knows anything about it, but she tells him to take the case, so she doesn't answer him. This sets up, obviously, focus on the mysterious briefcase. And I'm going to give you a hint, guys. Kate really wants the case. It's all hands on the beach as the ocean tide is moving in and threatening to submerge the fuselage where the luggage is being stored. Jack and Saeed discuss the need to move the camp further up the shore prior to nightfall. Jack asks Saeed about taking him to Danielle Rousseau, from a couple of episodes. But Saeed said that he's not going to do it. He explains that, she is just not in the frame of mind. She's not going to be helpful. Because Jack is in the frame of mind that he is still concerned about Claire and wants to be able to find her. So Jack asks about the documents that Saeed took. And Saeed says that the notes are all in French and there's lots of mathematical notations, but that does set Saeed up, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Meanwhile, Rose is able to kind of pay it forward and help Charlie cope with the loss of Claire. They work together with pulling luggage up to the new campsite. Talking helps, and she is optimistic about their circumstances, while Charlie is still obviously wallowing in pain and despair and depression. Most importantly, though, she tells him that no one is blaming him for what happened to Claire. And I think that that's a big part of what Charlie is dealing with, is the fact that he wasn't able to protect Claire. And he's worried about her. Has she died? We don't know. We know that Charlie was very near death's door. And he still has the marks to show it, all that he went through. Towards the end of the episode, Charlie says, hey, wasn't your husband on the plane? And And she said, yes, he was. But she's still very of the opinion that he is alive, and she is driven by faith. This probably resonates for Charlie because we've seen in flashbacks that he was a practicing Catholic. At the end, in the closing scene, Charlie asks for Rose's help, and she prays with a tearful Charlie in her arms. Meanwhile, earlier in the day, Boone calls Shannon useless and that he feels that everyone else thinks they are just a joke. He wants to contribute, so he and Locke are still trying to find Claire. Shannon says, but all the, proof of the tracking and everything else is gone. And he's like, nope, they're still working on trying to find her. But this leads to Shannon assisting Saeed with trying to translate Rousseau's map notes. Shannon struggles with the translations, and when Saeed said it was a mistake to ask for her help, Shannon mimics Boone's words that she is useless. Later in the evening, Shannon sits down with Saeed and tells him the notes are lyrics to a children's song from a movie that she has heard many times. She sings the song to him. I do wonder, foreshadowing, just kind of my own comment, realizing that everything has a reason, and there does seem to be chemistry between Saeed and Shannon. They seem to be getting on, but more importantly, it's interesting. Boone is in the shadows of the jungle looking out, watching them, and it feels very eerie and haunting. It's like he's not even there. Some humor ensues when Sawyer tries to open the case, giving us some comedic moments. Kate's effort to steal the case is foiled, and she enlists Jack's assistance at a price, the truth of what is in the case. She tells him it is the marshal's case. It has a couple of pistols and ammo, as well as spending money. Jack wants to know what else is in the case. She says there's nothing else. So he tells her they will open the case together. She does tell him that the key is in the marshal's wallet. So that brings up the awful task of having to dig up the body. Kate tries a sleight of hand trick, but Jack is wise to it. Why is she lying as though her life depends on it? Sawyer, who has the case, gives up the briefcase to Jack because Jack says he's going to withhold Sawyer's treatment. He says that within a couple of days, a fever will come on and Sawyer will see red lines up and down his arm. States that Sawyer will beg him to take the case just to cut off his arm. Sawyer said, nice story, and even if it's true, he doesn't think he'll do it. Jack said he would. So Sawyer gives up the case, but with a warning not to trust Kate. So again, foreshadowing amputation. And I'm jotted that because I'm like, we just can't avoid some of these signs. Kate's flashbacks are to a bank heist in a New Mexico town. She is pretending to be a photographer, and her name is Maggie. In the bank vault, one of the robbers reveals that Kate is the mastermind when the bank manager says to let her go. She grabs a gun and shoots the robbers because they are threatening the bank teller. And knowing that the bank robber has revealed his face, their whole plan basically, and that she's the mastermind, that he's planning to kill the bank manager. So like I said, she shoots the robbers, and that's why. So she works directly with the bank manager for a safe deposit box. She does open it, and it contains an envelope. That's it. Towards the end of the episode, Jack opens the case and goes through each item. Kate watches intensely. Jack finds a manila envelope that just says personal effects. It is, and he says, this is what you were looking for. She doesn't say anything, but she takes the envelope, opens it, and it's a small metal plane that looks a lot like their plane. So Jack says he wants the truth. So she tells him that it belonged to the man she loved. And he shakes her and says, "No, tell me the truth." And she says it again. And she says, "I killed him." She cries uncontrollably. Jack puts everything back in the case, except obviously for her personal effects, looks at her, and he walks away. And in the closing scene, we have Rose and Charlie together. We have Saeed and Shannon together. And Kate is sitting by a fire by herself with this little toy metal plane. And she's just gazing as though she's um, reliving memories of her own. And that concludes the episode. Hopefully, I didn't miss anything. I know it was kind of long, but it was
No,
a
there's
lot.
we were talking offline. There's a lot of different scenes with different characters chatting about a variety of different things, and no, well done.
Thank you.
I'm from your perspective, coming off of such an intense episode last week, how did you feel about this week's episode, knowing like starts so serene and
I know it does.
very, much lighthearted compared to the intensity of last week? Like what what were your thoughts as you were going through it?
Oh, I was like thinking, oh, this is nice. We're kind of going back to following a lot more stories, and thinking that there was a lot more humor in the episode, particularly at the expense of Sawyer. I mean, you see him trying to lock pick the briefcase, and when Michael and Hurley are, they're strapped down with all this luggage, and they're going past him, and they're looking, and Michael says, "Oh, that's a Halliburton. Yeah, good luck with that." And Hurley comes up shortly thereafter, and Hurley's like, "What's going on?" And Michael like, "Oh, he's trying to lock pick a Halliburton." And Hurley just laughs and says, like, "Yeah, good luck with that." But Michael leaves him with some words of advice, like either throw it down from a great height, or maybe, I don't know, use the axe on it and see if you can break it open. But apparently, this is a Samsonite version of a briefcase, and he's going to have a tough time. So I enjoyed the humorous parts, but I was so curious about why was Kate so hell bent on this case that
Yeah.
when she said it had the guns and the ammos, I was like, okay, she's concerned about Sawyer getting his hands on the weapons because that would put more power in his hands. Um, and if you want to try and control that and maybe keep, just like if you're in your own home and you keep the guns unloaded, locked away, and things like that, that I kind of understood, but she was almost fanatical about it.
Yeah.
And that's when we started getting the flashbacks. And I was like, there's got to be more to this story because I was thinking this seems so not typical of Kate to be so coy and say, "Oh, I don't care about it." But she tries to get the briefcase while he's sleeping, while Sawyer's sleeping. And then when he's dicking around trying to get the case open, she's lingering off screen. And as soon as he throws it down and he's like, "Son of a bitch, that didn't work." Here she comes, and she just smiles at him and grabs the case and takes off. Now, of course, he catches her.
Man,
And of
he
course,
must be fast because she had a huge head start.
she did. She really did. So I was kind of surprised that he caught up with her. And of course they have some sexual tension in there, which they had throughout. But man, she is definitely hell bent on having that case. So then when you finally see that it's a toy, I immediately figured that the toy belonged to maybe her son, and that some of her actions led to his death, just like we've seen in other episodes where you truly believe that you are the cause of events that leads to somebody's death. I kind of feel that it's a more symbolic that she killed him. But the show has a way of really twisting things. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Did she actually legitimately kill him, like an auto accident and he got killed or something? Um, I don't know, but um, I appreciated the lightheartedness, but it was anything but that, because between the shock of Kate and finding out that she, was a mastermind behind trying to get into this safe deposit box, and the extent that she would go to try to get it, really showed a determination that we hadn't seen before. Um, and how valued this little item was to her over everything else that we've seen up to this point. Um, the other thing that resonated for me, a couple other things, was Boone's use of words and how deep they cut Shannon. That
Yeah, that was really harsh. Like, how
Yeah,
could anyone not feel completely awful after hearing that?
yeah, and I think that that really drove a wedge between them and how different they really are. Um, so her pain resonated for me. Um, I really felt that for her. The other thing is more cinematic. I thought that the episode was just beautifully shot. There was a lot to it. I mean, we've got close-ups, we've got long shots, we've got action shots, we've got beautiful kind of spicy shots. And
The underwater
everything in
scene.
between, and the beautiful sunset, the fire in the closing scene, and how nicely it was lit and shot just really struck me. And then last, the music. Was the musical cues were exceptional, and I thought really just right on point. Um, all the way down to Shannon singing the little French song at the end, and how you could still
Yeah.
hear it as what looked at saw the other people on the beach as the episode closed. So yeah, I think, between Kate and her flashbacks and the extent that she would go for this little item and how much it meant to her, I'm very, very curious. And then potential foreshadowing that I picked up on. What about you in watching this episode again, after, an absence of 5 or 6 years? Did you pick up anything new or, um,
Um, well, the biggest thing I picked up on, we were discussing right before we started recording, how little there is of Claire in this episode. She was just abducted in the last episode. Um, and it's almost like it's like a taboo to bring her up in this episode. Like Boone tells Shannon that for 4 days and nights that like he and Locke are searching for her, but then he steals the axe to search for her. So that almost implies that they're actually not doing that. And maybe it's you brought up in reference to the metal object that they discovered. Jack asked Saeed to take him to the French woman to maybe find if she would know anything about where Claire might be. Uh, but I feel like that's it. There is no, and Saeed even referenced her not by name, but as the pregnant woman,
yeah,
which I also thought was weird. And so just for someone who is part of the surviving group, the fact that they don't show any active searching going on, I just thought was that is so weird. It was a very
Yeah.
strange thing that I know I never thought about before, so I don't know what made me think about that after this rewatch. But having you basically kind of had Charlie's reaction um, of trying to deal with her absence and Rose kind of being blunt about Charlie being rude, not helping.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that it made sense that he was kind of in shock and like in a daze and like so her telling him that he like she says, I understand you dealing with it, but we're all dealing with something. And it was like, all right, I don't know if I'd approach it that way. But she got through to him.
Yeah.
Like she was a big part of like kind of easing the burden that he's clearly feeling. Very emotional scene. Um, just even like before he breaks down at night, like when she's initially telling him that, we no one blames you. You tried, you almost died. And actually seeing the red marks around his neck is very oof.
Very
Very
visceral.
yeah. Um, so their conversation is definitely one of the moments that stand out from the episode just because when she tells him that no one blames him for Claire, you almost see like the realization to his face that like that's what he's been thinking about. And
Yeah.
um so yeah, the absence of Claire in this episode is the biggest takeaway. I also noticed like Sawyer at the beginning, you know, even though he was gross immediately after searching through the dead body underwater, like he went out there because Kate is so far away from camp, apparently, that, hey, Claire just got abducted. There's an unknown monster in the jungle, and there's bears, and Sawyer's like, it's not safe to be out here alone. And he's right. And the fact that
Yeah.
he thought of someone else other than himself is pretty big step. Kind of
Well,
much like last week's episode where he
yeah.
was tending the fire in Saeed's absence. So he's trying to counterbalance all of the bad behavior, I guess, at this
Yeah.
point. So he still has the gross commentary of sexual innuendo and it's
I
like,
did love his line early on when he says, "Oh, don't tell me you're one of those uh navel gazing mopey depressed I forgot the exact line. Before he got into the water and Kate followed suit, it was like, oh, you can have fun. Okay, come on, girl, come on in and they're splashing and stuff and
yeah,
they're having a good time. And I think that if it had been Jack out in the forest, I'm not sure that Sawyer would have been having his back. But because it's Kate and he does have an interest in her, obviously, there is an attraction. Um, but I also believed him when I think he was truly being honest to Jack that, hey, bro, I would be concerned about trusting her. And you
yeah,
can tell it does impact him, even though he doesn't, acknowledge or say, hey, bro, thanks for getting my back there or anything like that. But, I think Jack does kind of take it because he questioned him in the prior about having her tell him something that's true. So she told him
yeah.
about dad. And I mean, I felt like
How
that
many
seemed
times do you
very
have to
reasonable.
ask her to tell him something true? Every episode now?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. To the point of like, okay, dude, I think maybe you just don't trust what she has to say.
yeah,
And we've seen through flashbacks, which we get to see, he doesn't obviously, that she's very good at pretending to be other things.
Yeah.
To the point where there's a moment where it's going into the flashback to the bank vault initially. And she doesn't answer Jack, and but she stands up, uh and she's on the island, and she has like that sweet look, and then as soon as she stands up, I think to follow Jack, and they're going to open the case, um she went from a sweet looking face to one of determination, like a switch, kind of like Nathan did, or Ethan, I'm sorry, the way
Yeah.
Ethan went from an emotion to emotionalist. And I felt in that moment, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. There's a lot more behind those eyes than what we're necessarily seeing. And of course, we see that she was the mastermind behind just getting in. And I mean, she is calculating, because the robber's
She's a
like,
badass.
she is. And I mean, even the robber's like, oh, Maggie, I'm gonna find you, I'm gonna kill you. And all she says back to him is, my name's not Maggie. And that,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, I don't know. I think I would have been quaking in my boots if I was that robber, thinking like, oh shit, what did I just tangle with? You know?
Yeah, she's like that comment to me was like her just saying, "I'm not worried about you." Like you don't
Yeah.
even know who I am. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
ah, that was so telling.
Yeah. Yeah. It is definitely very telling about her, and did make me have to like kind of like stop and think about, again, we don't really know these people. Um and again, it's kind of waking up, and I think it's somewhat intentional, like when Saeed says the pregnant girl. And I know it's kind of jolting and jarring because I'm thinking, how does he not know her name? But I mean, with 45 other people, and half of them up in a cave and the other half on the beach, that I guess maybe he wouldn't know her name, but she had been down on the beach. So I just find it does keep the audience out of step.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, very subtle technique, to keep us kind of jarred and just kind of like, oh, wait a minute, why wouldn't he know her name? But he doesn't know her name. That's kind of weird. And the other thing I was thinking about when you were talking about how, there's very little said about Claire, I was thinking back to the fact that a whole month went by between episodes. So all the original audience sat there. Where's Claire? And then you get to the next episode, and a whole month has gone by, even though it's only a few days in Lost World. But
Yeah.
for the audience, it has been a month, and there's really so little mentioned about her that you're like, how could everybody forget her that quick? It was kind of weird. And
Yeah,
it's like,
definitely.
where's the grief beyond Charlie being so impacted? Because Jack doesn't, I mean, Jack says that he wants to find her, but he's also doing other things. So it is. It puts you out of step. It keeps you out of step all the time. Um, with the
Yeah, and with
jokes.
Saeed's comment, him not referencing her by name is like, well, she's the one that handed him his envelope with picture back
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, is he saying pregnant girl because that's how everyone else on the beach talks about her because they don't know her name? Or does he truly not know her name? And it's like, so you're right. It's the way that the creator's able to keep the audience off kilter,
Mm-hmm.
is really well done. And it is just such an oddity that someone was abducted and it's almost like an afterthought. And like Rose isn't worried about, and everyone else who's trying to clear the beach so that way their stuff doesn't get washed away. There doesn't seem to be any concern about Claire. Um, and I understand Charlie being kind of like comatose about everything because he's almost died. He couldn't save Claire. And then everyone else is kind of moving on by relocating the camp. And it's just very bizarre sequence of events to take place the episode after someone gets abducted.
Yeah, and I was just thinking back to when um Jack saves Boone, but is not able to go. I mean, he tries to go back out and save the woman in the ocean, but she drowns.
Yeah.
Um, I felt like we got to witness more impact of her death on others than we do the disappearance of Claire and her unborn
Yeah.
child. That is very unsettling for me
And
to realize that.
does it imply that the group somehow feels relieved that the burden of a pregnant woman is no longer there?
Yeah, because
Which
how do you
that's,
take care of a child, a baby? Well, obviously the baby can nurse for a while, but eventually, what do you do?
yeah.
Um, and
Yeah. It's just a very, very weird thing. And I can't explain it. Um, and that's probably the most um recognizable fact about this episode is the fact is the absence of her.
yeah,
So, um, I do find it interesting. You'd mentioned Saeed and Shannon. Um, I do think that there is a semblance of chemistry there. Um, it's friendly banter, it's not necessarily flirting, but I don't know. There is something about the way that they're trying to communicate with each other that
they look at
sounds
each
like they
other.
are,
Yeah.
yeah, that enjoy being in the same space. Um,
Yeah,
and then when she sings at the end, whoo,
oh my gosh. Yeah,
captivating.
yeah, yeah. I feel like, I hope we get to see more of her story because she is an interesting character and I did like seeing her. Obviously, she's a beautiful woman, and she's pleasing to look at. But I also feel like I want to be able to see her find her roots and that she's not useless, that she has purpose, and that she's comfortable with the purpose that she finds for her life, that she finds some sort of balance. Um, yeah, I sense that she's been the trophy girl, so to speak. We do find out that she realized that, she was living in Saint Tropez or whatever. I'm not and
You're
that
somewhere in France.
yeah, that she was with a guy and the guy had a kid. The kid hated her, you know. Um and she seems, at least from the stance of knowing that Boone's mom, their mom, has a company that somehow she's never needed to want for anything, which really comes from a different world than Saeed. So it's kind of interesting that we do see them working together and they seem comfortable, like you said, in each other's space. Him and she's trying to work at the translations and she's like, you never told me about the math. And he says, don't worry about the math, I'll take care of the math. It's
Yeah.
kind of a yin yang type of relationship, partnership going on there, like they're each working to each other's strengths and supporting, where they each have weaknesses. And it's nice. It's kind of a nice breath of fresh air, so to speak,
Yeah.
because I feel like, oh, I was thinking when I was watching Jack and Kate interaction, and I was thinking, well, you know what? If we had, and I don't remember when Facebook came about, but I'm like, if we were to look at a Facebook page for both of them, and you look at the relationship status, it would say it's complicated.
Yeah.
I really feel like, man, they're really it seems like they're getting along, and then something comes along, and now it's like, will they be able to work past whatever deep-seated thing that's going on for Kate? And is honestly, I was like, is Kate even her real name? You know,
Right? Yeah.
is that a lie? You know, just like we know Sawyer is not really Sawyer, but we don't know what his real name is. Just said he took the
And
name.
Hurley's not really Hurley.
And Hurley's not really Hurley. So, um, I'm also been hypothesizing that all these people were on the plane for a particular reason, and we're slowly getting their stories. So I'm wondering if each person has an aspect of their life that led them to be where they're at, like something they did in their life, and they're having to almost like reflect and try to learn, but in a more cosmic existential sense, like almost like they're in a purgatory, like they could go either way depending how they make their decisions. And I almost kind of like had a little bit of that feeling in this episode that started to kind of formulate as we start to see more and more of the flashbacks, that they each have some like kind of deep-seated secrets going on. And I mean, Case is really buried. We've seen some with Jack and getting a better understanding of that. Um, but I just think that I don't know, I think there's something about that. Um, and I'm curious to hear about, Hurley and more on Locke and stuff like that. It's almost like from the episodes before the Tabula Rosa, and
Yeah.
getting a clean slate. And yet Jack's not allowing Kate to have a clean slate.
No, it keeps
I mean, he's really
yeah.
pushing her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say I felt more bothered by Jack's aggressive tone towards her last week's episode, this week's episode. It's like she gave him an opportunity to know the truth, and he passed, saying, "Hey, we all deserve a fresh start." Well, let her have a fresh start. Like,
Oh,
like if it really, and so I don't think I ever noticed it that much before, but he's really laying it on thick. Like, who are you? Like, I get it, you're supposed to be the leader and that stuff, but
mhm.
just because you like Kate doesn't mean like she owes you anything. Um,
Yeah.
and similarly with Sawyer, with whatever interest he has in Kate, she doesn't owe him anything. Um, and I think it's Kate is a fascinating, obviously she's one of the top characters from this episode. Um, but she is so equally as much a mystery as she is like capable. Um, and so there's a lot that we don't know, and that revolves around what she was accused of doing, being arrested, and also the flashback and the episode revolve around a toy airplane. Um, and what the hell does that mean? Like it's, there is no certainty in the episode or with these
Mm-mm.
characters as they try to like survive. And Kate, as you pointed out, she is determined to get this briefcase at all cost, and even like digging up and smelling the clearly rotting corpse, like
Wow.
what is she not willing to do? Um,
Mhm.
so it really makes me wonder, like, was she trained to fight? Like, does she have experience with guns? Like, she told the bank teller, and like, I don't know how to use this, and but clearly she knows how to handle
Oh, she
herself.
knows. Yeah.
You know, she was pinned down. She able to headbutt Sawyer off of her. Like, so she's definitely, one of the more interesting characters, not only in the episode, but the series. Um, and she's dealing with trauma of her own, like, and it's an
Yeah.
unknown of whatever burden she has. Charlie, it's understandable. It's like he was strung up to a tree, almost died, or he did die, was brought back, and Claire was taken, and he failed to protect her. So that's clear, obvious
Yeah.
trauma, and whatever Kate is dealing with is like, uh, we still haven't seen that yet. So it's interesting seeing those different levels of, you
Yeah.
know, trauma on display.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, it's interesting how we're able to take at face value, like Charlie's hurt, and the trauma that he's dealing with versus Kate, where we have to question, is she just using Jack and Sawyer off each other every so often? Um, what is the true face of Kate? Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like I know her less now than I did before. Um, and we saw how charming she could be to the bank manager, and how she could manipulate others that I don't know that those were real tears, whether because her head was down and stuff like that. So, were those real tears, or was that just another story to get Jack kind of off her back and
Yeah.
maybe leave her alone? Because she's done that where, she's pulled away. Um, I think her friendship with Saeed and even Charlie, what little bit that they've had interaction wise, I think is more, just in my gut, I feel like is more truthful because she's not expecting anything from them. She's not trying to get anything from them. There isn't a reason to charm them for any sort of reason. And I think she did actually care about the fact that, Saeed leaving and, kind of a true friend,
Yeah.
was leaving. And she didn't have somebody that she could just comfortably sit with or had a similar disposition as her, who is kind of dangerous, um, but has also got it in check, you know, and knows
That's
how to
a
kind of
great
control
point.
it for the most part.
Yeah. The difference in relationships that she has with Sawyer and Jack versus Saeed and Charlie, that's a great point. Like, she doesn't feel the burden of two people always constantly wanting something from her when Saeed and Charlie are more likely to just kind of being themselves, going through the normal motions of day to day. Yes, they're trying to get rescued and that stuff, but there doesn't seem to be any hidden motives with Saeed and Charlie, where
Mm-mm.
Sawyer and Jack are just openly curious about her motives. So she doesn't have to pretend with Saeed and Charlie. So yeah, I think that's spot on. Like,
Yeah.
um, and it makes sense that she was so distraught with Charlie last week.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, it does.
she,
I mean, I think there is more real tears there than
yes,
even what she shed this week. That's a great point.
yeah,
Yeah, I think she really was upset about Charlie, the way they found him.
yeah. Oof. Still visualize that scene.
Oh, that was that was horrendous. Absolutely horrendous.
Yeah,
Man, they know how to play with our heartstrings. That's all I can say.
yeah,
Well, you I'm going to start with the second question first because we've been talking about the characters quite a bit. And you did mention that Kate is obviously one of the most interesting characters. Were there others? Who was kind of your top pick for the week?
Um, I think Kate is the obvious choice, but I think I'm gonna go a different direction.
Hmm.
Um, Boone's comment to Shannon is so brutal. It's just how he calls her useless, and he means it. Like he, and yes, Shannon has shown that she wants to sunbathe and that she believes that they'll be rescued, but that's kind of also a facade of not dealing with the fact that they're probably not getting rescued anytime soon. And we've seen those moments from her, but we've also seen her step up to try to help, which maybe is a role that she's not used to. So when Saeed tells her it was a mistake to ask for her help, she could have easily just like gone back to sunbathing and not worried about it. But she came back to him
Yeah.
and said, like, she remembered the song from the notations that were she was translating. And I think that's a big deal. Like, I think that kind of tells me she's trying to prove that she's not useless and that she's not going to give up on what Saeed asked her to do. And maybe that indicates more than her just trying to prove herself. Maybe that indicates that there is something between her and Saeed, and she wants to, do something for him by just simply completing a task that he asked her to do. Um, because he just asked for a favor. And,
Yeah.
I feel like asking for a favor is something you ask from a friend. And I don't know, there was something about her approaching him towards the end of the episode. Um, and then her singing in French, just I'm gonna put her at the top as my most interesting character just because words can hurt. And I think that her stepping up in spite of that, I think says a lot. So, what about you?
Uh, yeah, I felt like Kate was kind of a given. So like you, I went kind of a different direction and Shannon was also, I felt like my top pick. I felt like it was good to see more of Kate. But I did appreciate um getting to kind of check in with Shannon. And just how ruthless Boone is. That pretty boy with those nice light blue eyes is,
Yeah,
can be really cutting. And in one breath he says, I want to contribute. Then why are you calling your sister useless? Do you have that right to say that? Maybe be more encouraging, and saying, hey, you helped with the French. Maybe there's some other things that maybe you can help with,
yeah,
or something, to help her kind of seek out ways to contribute herself. And in no way do I think that anybody thought that either one of them were a joke. We never got that inclination from anybody.
no, that's never been brought up.
So I think I do feel that that's Boone insecurity kind of showing through and him basically, laying his own weaknesses and insecurities onto her to make her feel just as bad as he feels.
Yeah.
Potentially. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist,
No,
obviously,
that makes sense.
but
If throughout the series, he's been wanting to play a leading role in
yeah,
some way, take charge in some way, and that just isn't the role that others see him in. So he's just trying to fit in some way and help and be a part of like sort of the way they're surviving. So I could see him projecting his own insecurities onto her. And I know they have a back and forth, lashing out at each other type of relationship, but um, like I think one of the earlier episodes that he used similar language about like you're just laying on the beach doing nothing or something similar, but
He
the way
was
he
pretty
expressed it,
derogatory to her earlier, yes, and I can't remember the exact words that he said, but it was kind of like, oh, she was doing a pedicure at one point. So I know that she's being the writers have positioned her character a certain way. Um, but yeah, he definitely calls out her weakness, her weaknesses
yeah,
and her inabilities to cope and kind of rise to the occasion now that they're on the island. And I think, you know, it's a very good point that you make that every person deals with things a different way.
yeah,
And it's her way of dealing with things in her way based on her background, her context, what she's feeling, and for him to lay that on her. I really, I didn't, I meant to jot it down, but you just jogged my memory that I felt that it was, I'm going to say, an emotional and mental abuse that he was laying on her. And I didn't like Boone very much at that point, at any point where he's pretty derogatory to her. And yet at the same time, he went up against Sawyer, got his ass handed to him because he thought that Sawyer had the inhalers and he was getting the inhalers for her.
yeah,
So he's every character is so complex and have, different motivations. And, I think it comes back to the adage that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones that we hurt, you know,
yeah,
and that we lash out. And maybe that's one of our, I'm going to say, maybe lessons that we take from seeing that the way that played out between them. And taking from it that, hey, that's not a nice thing to say, or that's not a nice thing to do. Um, and then you have kind of the flip side, because Shannon just immediately thought Saeed was there asking her a favor because of her brother, that her
yeah,
brother had put him up to it. And in actuality, it was just Saeed asking for a favor. And there was no ulterior motive. And she did initially say no, but then she did agree to help. Um, so I was crushed when when Saeed told her, uh, this was a bad idea.
yeah,
And I was like, oh man, that was the wrong thing to say. But I almost, for a moment there, I almost thought that the way he was looking at her is that he was starting to become emotionally involved, like he had with Nadia. I think it's Nadia, right?
yeah. And he didn't
Uh,
want to like get frustrated with her because he was starting to see her differently.
yeah. And maybe he was feeling a little scared to allow somebody in, or alternatively, for him to bring his own guard down. And maybe that's what he was really saying, because you get miscommunications and things like that. So I did kind of wonder if he was actually saying that as a way of protecting his own emotions and, trying to figure out, do I actually feel something for this person? Who I really don't know. Um,
Yeah,
so it's interesting, you're starting to get a little bit of that kind of courtship and romance. signs, like we did with Jack and Kate, and alternatively with Kate and Sawyer, you know. So
Yeah, and it's so subtle, but it
yeah,
just, and maybe it's just they have amazing chemistry on screen together. But I don't know, like you said, the way Saeed was communicating with her, asking her about Paris, and I
yeah.
don't know, it just seemed like there was an interest
Mm-hmm.
behind his tone. So that
Yeah,
that makes sense that maybe he's trying to guard himself. And that's why he's like, no, maybe this was a mistake, and um, but
yeah,
ultimately she doesn't give up on it, and you
yeah.
know, now I'm interested, well, because I can't remember. I'm interested to see, like, well, okay, what plays out next?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and I find it interesting that we both didn't pick Kate, and that you mentioned that we know less about her now. I mean, she ruse what, three other guys to organize a heist just for a toy play. Yeah, it,
Well, and I think
she's very
she,
interesting, but man, we don't know
yeah,
much about her.
yeah, and I think it was really about the fact that she got the ringleader, robber on her side, and the other two were just, coming along, because they were part of that ringleader's gang or something.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it is very interesting, how, yeah, we seem to know less than we did before. I don't feel like, I feel we took some steps back with Kate, where typically we get, some answers and then new questions. This, I feel like I have a lot more questions about Kate, and I feel even less in the know of who she is.
Yeah, we
Uh,
got more questions, but we didn't get any answers.
now. So going to our first question, uh, after all that we've discussed, do you have a favorite scene or standout moment from the episode?
Uh, I have a few. Uh, we already talked about the lack of Claire.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the absence of a scene. Um, but we already talked about that a lot, so I don't think I'll pick that one.
Mhm.
So then the scenes that come to mind are at the beginning, the interaction with Sawyer and Kate, and him wanting to look out for her because she's out all on her own. Um, the scene with Saeed and Shannon at the end, and her singing is incredible.
Mhm.
Um, but I think I'll go with the scene where Rose kind of absolves Charlie from whatever guilt he's feeling, where she tells him that, I mean, I think I wrote it down exactly what she said. Rose said to Charlie, quote, "Nobody blames you for what happened to Claire. It's not your fault. You did everything that you could do, and you came very close to dying yourself." And then what's haunting is that he responds by saying, "Maybe I should have died."
Mhm.
And the fact that he has so much guilt that he thinks that maybe he should have died for not being able to protect Claire is, oh, that is like heartbreaking to come to terms with. Like,
Yeah.
uh, and we've talked about it before, incredible writing,
Mhm.
um, on this show. And like, like he's recovering from, he's a drug addiction. And, Claire was a point of light for him. And the fact that he admits that maybe he should have died is just that I don't even know how to take that. It's definitely hard. But Rose's comments kind of give him permission to kind of forgive himself in a
Mhm.
way, and she ultimately helps him with that at the end. But yeah, so I'll say Rose talking to Charlie in that one scene where he admits that maybe dying would have been better. Is there a scene that or a few scenes that you were thinking about with regards to your most interesting or favorite?
Yeah, we've talked about it, so I won't belabor it very much, but I thought the ending scene, it it's just beautifully shot. They're on the beach with the fires going. The voice of Shannon singing the French song to Saeed because he really wanted to hear it, and I think he genuinely was connecting with her, um, and wanting to not to hear it for not even necessarily that he was going to get anything from it that was going to help him as much as just hearing her, and being focused in on her and her experience. So I really like that. I was practically in tears when um, Charlie started to sob, because in that conversation that you related, Rose tells him, "Hey, don't be afraid to ask for help." And at that in that ending scene, he starts to sob, um, and asks her to help him. And so, she calls him baby and, becomes very motherly to him, and basically prays for him.
Yeah.
And so we hear the French song and we hear her praying. And then it shifts over to Kate, who's not saying anything, and just looking at the little toy plane. And there's real sadness. You know, um, it's it's a reflective scene. It's beautiful. It's kind of quiet. Um, yeah, it really very emotional. Um, so I would say that that's going to stand out for me.
Yeah. I could listen to that song being sung over and over again. It's I don't know. I don't know if it's the tone of her voice or what, but it's and it's a complete contrast from last week's over, like dramatic and intense and people dying or not dying um and that song is almost like very, very soothing to listen to. Um yeah, that's a great scene.
Yeah, it's kind of it just made me think that remember how Claire, when she's in the lawyer's office, like her last request before she's going to sign the papers, she asks the intended couple if they know a particular lullaby.
Yeah.
And I just now kind of connecting that the song that uh Shannon is singing, I didn't necessarily recognize, but I'm sure if we heard the English words, it probably is like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or some other sort of lullaby. So
Yeah.
I find that very interesting that comfort from, you know, very old lullabies, I think. I mean, I
Yeah.
wasn't familiar with the one that Claire was um referencing, but I'm assuming that it's probably a more, folk traditional or something similar to what I think maybe Shannon was singing. I think they just did a really nice setup. And again, we've talked about this many times before, how the writers really, you know, everything's in there for a purpose and they plant it and they harvest it, at some point down the road, for us to make connections. And I think here's another one that we're able to connect as viewers. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great way to end an episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we hit all the points that I was looking at. Um, anything left on your in your notes?
Um, I will say I was wondering about you brought it up earlier with Michael and Hurley. Um, in my back of my mind, I was like, how do they know about the lock being such an unbreakable lock?
Oh, that's true.
But apparently Sawyer doesn't. Or maybe he does know, he doesn't care, he's gonna try, but like it seemed like Michael and Hurley knew about it and were like, what are you what are you even doing? So I always that stuck with me. Like why do they know about it? I guess Michael being in construction, maybe that's something they would use like locks on doors or something like that. So maybe he would have some experience with that. I don't know why Hurley would know about that. So it's just an interesting little, again, a small moment that gives some knowledge about the character's backstory without fully fleshing out what that backstory is. So I like that scene.
And now that you say that, it is interesting that he doesn't because I think he had a silver case where he has all the money when he's going
Yeah.
to do his con. So it's interesting that he wouldn't know about that case. Um, I just took it that it was like a Samsonite and it was, kind of referencing the old Samsonite commercials that, they take a licking, but they keep on going and,
Yeah.
you can't break them, and that's really what I kind of thought. But you're right. Why would Hurley know? Why would Michael know? Neither one of them worked for the airlines as far as we know. Um, so it is kind of weird that Sawyer had a similar looking briefcase, but he doesn't know the Halliburton
Yeah.
brand. Yeah, I bet that's going to come back sometime.
It's got to. Yeah. I mean, and Hurley last week mentioned like he was somewhat of a warrior back where he's from, knowing about
Mm-hmm.
locks, and it's just like, all right, give me some more about Hurley. So,
Yep, yep.
yeah. Um, I think this episode uh was a good one to come off of because last week's was so intense and not having to feel like you're on edge of your seat the entire episode. Um, so maybe that was intentional by the creators too, to that way kind of let everyone decompress from, some very intense scenes and get some more character backstories
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah,
We learned some things about Kate, but I don't know if we really figured out what's going on.
exactly. Exactly. Well, thanks to everyone that tuned in this week. We hope that you'll like, subscribe, leave some comments down in the bottom. Just recognize the fact that I'm the newbie. So if you want to talk about other things that is beyond this episode, just kind of note that it's a spoiler. So that way I can avoid it and Travis can take the lead and, maybe we converse about it. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely love to hear what you thought was your favorite scene and the most interesting character. And if you're new, what are you thinking of this series yourself? Or if you're returning and watching it after some time, what are you picking up now that you hadn't the first time around? Um, and with that, we hope that you'll join us again next week for episode 13 and our discussion around that. Maybe we'll find out what happened to Claire. So,
Yeah. Thanks for watching, everyone.
thanks.